Hi guys, welcome back to my channel. This is Chelsea. In this video, I'm going to go through my February wrap up. I had a really good month of reading. I read 15 books, so I'm going to go through them from least liked to best liked, and I have some amazing books or some new favorites in here for sure. So let's get started. All right, so first up, I have Love Redesigned by Lauren Asher. This book was part of my vlog from a few weeks ago, reading all romances. I gave this book 3 stars. While I did enjoy some of the writing and would probably read from this author again sometime in the future, I didn't really feel too connected to this couple. It was basically like an old rivals to lovers. They were friends when they were younger, but they were rivals. Lover's story where they met up after she got out of a really bad relationship, and then they slowly are working on a design project together, and they're in this small town. This book had great small town vibes, and then they end up getting together. I ranked it lowest in that romance vlog. It just wasn't exactly my favorite. I didn't really connect to the couple at all. There was some funny scenes and some fun characters and some good spice scenes, but that's pretty much it. I haven't really thought about it much since then. The next book I want to talk about is A Study in Drowning by Ava Reid. This book I also gave 3 stars to. I liked it, but I haven't really thought about it much since I read it. It was okay. I could see someone really liking it, and I could see other people not really liking it. It's very middle of the road. It's a YA kind of fantasy romance. I just didn't find, I liked the writing. Again, I thought it was a well-written book. It wasn't bad. I don't know. I don't know if it's because it was YA or what. Just very little stakes. Not a ton happens. Given that we do a few different things, there's no real like climax in the book, at least in my opinion. It kind of like was pretty slow paced throughout. Thought the love interest was pretty cute. She, our girl, is in college, and the way this world works is she's very interested in literature, but she's not allowed to be in the literature college because she's a woman. So she ends up being an architect student, and she ends up going on this like assignment kind of far away to do this project for a late author that she loved, and her and another person are kind of just like digging through some of his past and learning more about this figure. And yeah, while it was okay, but nothing that I would probably recommend unless you really were into reading like a YA fantasy, which I enjoy some YA fantasies, but some of them are just kind of falls flat. It reminded me a little bit of, what was that book called? Sorcery of Thorns, which I read last year. And I liked that book a lot, way better than this. I thought a lot more happened in that book. This one was just a little too slow for what they were trying to do. Next up, I have 2 books, a dark duology that I read, which was a really good time and a fun palate cleanser. So we have The King of Flesh and Bone and The Queen of Rotten Pain, both by Liv Zander, and I gave them both 3 stars. This was just a fun time. It was very addicting, very good. I needed a palate cleanser at the time. I read them very quickly. I would say trigger warnings definitely for this one. It is a darker like fantasy romance. Our character, for whatever reason, kind of stumbles into the King of Flesh and Bone land or area, and he's upset by this. And it's an enemies to lovers situation. And he's horrible to her. He just like tortures her, and she tries to run away a bunch, and they end up falling in love. But it's definitely a dark romance. If you like dark fantasies, I would definitely read them because they were pretty quick, and I had a good time reading them. Okay, so my next book is also a 3-star, which is a little unfortunate because I was really excited for it. But Ruthless Vows by Rebecca Ross. This is the sequel to Divine Rivals, which is a book I read last year and really enjoyed. It's also a YA fantasy. While I did enjoy some of this book, it fell a little flat for me. The first one was really just a beautiful story about love and grief and war. And while this one still had some of those elements, I just wasn't really feeling it as much as I was in the first one. So the couple, Iris and Roman, I really liked in the first one, and they were still good in this one, but we didn't get a ton of them. Their reunion was pretty quick. I just wish we had a little more of them, and it was still a sweet story. I would definitely recommend this duology because I thought it was really beautiful. I just kind of wanted more from the second book. So up next we have The Bromance Book Club by Liza K. Adams, and I gave this book 4 stars. For whatever reason, I thought in the vlog that I was doing that this was going to be the hardest book to get through, and I ended up really, really liking it. It was really easy to read. It was a fun read. It was more comedic. It was more comedic than I thought it was going to be. It was about a guy who's going through some troubles in his marriage, and it's mostly about this couple. And he's a baseball player, and he gets kind of inducted with this group of men who are the Bromance Book Club, who read like romance novels and try to help each guy out with like their romance lives, kind of taking tips from these romance novels. And yeah, this one was fun. I mean, for what it was, I had a really good time. I wouldn't say it was like life-changing or anything like that, but it was a fun read. I read the synopsis of a few of the other ones because there's a series, and while there's no character that really stuck out too much for me that I'd want to read more about, they do also sound like they'd be fun and funny. And the couple in this one was fine. I am not a huge second chance romance person, so I think it sounds like there'll be different tropes in the other books, which I might like a little better. So we had another book in my romance vlog. What a fun experiment, but this one I knew was going to be a favorite. This is You Again by Kate Golbeck. I also gave this 4 stars. I knew I would love it just because of what this story is sourced from. We're in New York City, and we have these 2 characters who are really opposites, and they slowly, every couple of years, run into each other. And then at some point, they keep running into each other. And then at some point, they end up becoming friends. And then after a while, they realize that they want to be more than friends. And I love When Harry Met Sally. But this was different enough from When Harry Met Sally. Like, I think they changed enough, too, that it didn't feel like I was just reading, like, a book version of the movie. And I really liked the 2 characters a lot. And it was fun. I really rooted for both of these characters, and it was just really fun watching them fall in love. And it was just good to read something that I kind of just knew I'd like and immediately liked from the beginning. And I would say even if you've never even heard of When Harry Met Sally or seen that movie, you would probably really like this because it's just a sweet, easygoing romance. Up next we have The Wolf and the Witch by Carissa Weeks. I gave this book 4 stars. This is part of the Witchwalkers series that had like The Witch Collector that I've already read and The City of Ruin. There's a 3rd book coming out, I believe next month, which I'm pretty excited for. This is a novella in the series. So I don't want to say too much about the novella just because that would give away it's like the 3rd book in this series. But I would say that I do love The Wolf and the Witch. Last book left us on a big cliffhanger, so it was interesting kind of to see what some of the other characters were doing kind of in between this and the next book that's coming out. And it just really focused on their romance, and I really, really enjoyed it. But I don't want to say too much because, like I said, it is the 3rd in the series. The first book is mostly about a enemies to lovers romance of this witch and the witch collector. This one is about the witch and the wolf. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. I really enjoyed them, and I really, really liked this book. And while I go kind of back and forth on this series as a whole, I do think of it quite fondly. But I know there's been times when I've been reading each of them where I've been either a little bored or kind of pulled out of it. And I don't know why, because I actually do really like a lot of the characters. But for a novella, I thought this was really sweet. And I will be continuing this series when the next book comes out because I am interested in what happens going forward. Then we had The Ever Queen by L.J. Andrews. This I gave 4 stars. This is the sequel to The Ever King, which I read last month. And that was a enemies to lovers romance, fantasy, like pirate romance, which was really, really fun and I enjoyed a lot. And I think I liked this one just as much. We had kind of Romeo and Juliet vibes, but between Sea Fae and Land Fae. And our main girl ends up being taken in the beginning of that first book by the Sea Fae, and she ends up falling in love with the Bloodsinger, whom she knew as a child when he was imprisoned by her family, and they have this really sweet love story. So not to spoil too much of what happens at the end of the last book, but I liked this one. They were apart at the beginning of this story, which I always am annoyed by because I just want them to get back together when the couple is apart. So I end up reading it really fast, waiting for them to get together. I think I liked the beginning of this book better than the second part of the book, only just because we had a lot more character development and it was really fun to see some different characters interacting with different people. I guess my only big flaw with this book is I feel like there's a villain problem. I didn't really care that much about the villain. I never once thought he was going to win, I guess, and his reasonings weren't that interesting either. So it wasn't, maybe that's why the second half of the book was a little anticlimactic for me. But I liked that our girl kind of took hold of her power a little more. She was really hesitant in the first book and she kind of kept being taken and pushed around, and she kind of stood up for herself a lot more in this book. And while this was just a duology, it's part of a bigger series that has a bunch of books that come for it, which I would consider reading because I really enjoyed this story a lot and a lot of the characters. There's a spin-off happening with one of the characters. That's a book that's going to come out later this year that I would also totally read. But I would recommend this duology because it was just really easy to read, a lot of fun and intense, fast-paced, very action-packed, and had the right amount of world building and fantasy elements, but also a good amount of the love story and the characters and the couple, and I just really, really liked it. Then we have Do Your Worst by Rosie Danan, and I gave this book 4 stars. This book literally came in on my Libby app from the library the day after I finished doing the romance reading blog because I would have loved to include this. This was such a fun read for me. I really liked both of these characters and the whole theme. We're following a girl who's was sent to Scotland. She works in like kind of the occult realm. She gets rid of curses or cursed things, and she learned all this from her grandmother, but they've never like tried to make money off of their abilities to do this. So she is trying to work that side hustle. So she goes to Scotland because she's been hired by this company who wants to repurpose this land basically, but it's cursed. So she's going to figure out how to uncurse it. There's also an academic there who is our love interest. And when they meet up in the beginning at a bar, they don't know who each other are. They really, really hit it off. And then when he realizes who she is, he thinks she's, just trying to he doesn't believe in any of these curses or anything like that. So, and he's there for actual academic purposes to kind of clear up his own name as well. And so they're on opposing sides. And I just found this to be a really fun love story. I really liked the atmosphere. I thought the two people had really good banter, and I really just enjoyed all their scenes together. But I would definitely recommend this. This is probably one of my favorite romances from this month, even though it wasn't included in the vlog that I did. I guess I just like certain romances. Okay, next up we have Slaying the Vampire Conqueror by Carissa Broadbent. I love Carissa Broadbent. I love her writing style. This is another vampire enemies to lovers romance set in the same world as the Chrononaxia series. This is just a standalone story. It's part of a Monster to Enemies lovers series that a bunch of different authors wrote different stories for, where it's pretty much always a enemies to lovers monster type situation. This is obviously a vampire romance. We have our main girl who has been tasked to infiltrate the vampire conqueror's armies, get close to him, succeed. She's there to basically assassinate him. She works for or is part of this religious cult-like organization where she's been trained as an assassin. She's actually was blinded by these people, which has in some ways benefited her because she now has different magical senses that go beyond just eyesight, which is really helpful for what she does. But she slowly realizes that this guy is not the conqueror that she thought he was. He is actually quite kind. He never like attacks humans unnecessarily, and he just really wants to like overthrow the current king and political system. So it's just their romance and their story falling in love. I think with Carissa Broadbent, she writes amazing series, but she also writes really well standalone, and the novella I read from her last month. She's just become one of my favorite fantasy romance authors. I would definitely recommend this, even if you haven't read anything else by her, because this is a standalone story. And I haven't read any of the other like Monster Enemies to Lovers novels, even though I've heard of a few of those authors. I read kind of about a few of them, and I wasn't planning to read any of them. A couple of them sound pretty juicy and fun, so maybe in the future I will do one or two of those. Okay, now we're getting into some of my 5-star books of the month, which I have several, which is really exciting. First, we have Magnolia Parks by Jessa Hastings. I loved this book. It was definitely my favorite from that reading vlog. I thought the writing was exceptional. It was just like a work of art. This is a series that I saw literally everywhere last year, so I've been wanting to read it for a long time. I only read the first one so far, but believe me, the rest of them I have ordered. I'm super excited that I got this edition of all of the books and the new one that just came out. So March, TBR has them written all over it. But in terms of this book, we're following Magnolia and BJ and their friends. They are young London rich kids, basically, that all grew up together, and it's the back and forth of their relationship. They are broken up through most of the story, but they're very like meant to be together, back and forth relationship. They're almost together a million times in the story. I really got everything I wanted from this book. It was definitely like kind of Gossip Girl vibes. I talked about this a lot in the vlog, so I'm not going to restate all of that, but it's just a fun, kind of dramatic, it just feels like you're watching a television show, like very from that era, you know, like CW, Gossip Girl. They name drop a lot of very like important brands. There is basically no adult supervision at all in this. They're all in their early 20s, and they're all constantly just like messing up. And I can't wait to read the next one. The Daisy Hates book is up next, and I think this whole series is going to end up being a 5-star series for me, so I'm really excited to read the rest of them. Then we have A Kingdom This Cursed and Empty by Stasia Stark. This I also gave 5 stars to. This is the second book in the Kingdom of Lies series. The first book was A Court This Cruel and Lovely. And since this is the second book, I'm not going to go too deep into the plot, but I really liked it. I think I liked it a little better than the first one. I think I gave the first one 4 stars. We follow Priska, and she lives in a world where you have magical abilities, but it's taken away from you as a young baby. And then when you're like 25, I believe, it's given back to you. But there are some people who are like hybrids who have these magical abilities, and there's an evil king who is basically hoarding everyone's magical powers for himself to keep him alive and thriving, and he's done horrible things to these hybrid people. There's also a group of fae in this, and I really liked this one probably a little better. I think the pacing was a little better in this one. Went to a lot more places, we met a lot more people, the world building was really great. Now that we've gotten a lot more backstory, a lot more interesting things happening, Priska's kind of coming to terms with some of her abilities and who she is in this world during this book. The love interest is amazing. I love Lorien. I loved him from the beginning. And I love them together. I would say Priska is my new favorite female main character this year, anyway, so far. I've just really liked it. We've got another book to read. I don't think it's I'm not sure if it's a trilogy. There might be another book after that, but I know there's another book out. So I'm really excited because this, of course, left off on a bit of a cliffhanger. I like this one. We got an interesting new POV, which I wasn't sure about in the beginning, but then ended up really liking. And I'm really interested to see what happens in the next book. The villain in this one's also great. We have a really good villain and a lot of morally gray characters kind of on top of the villain, which makes it for just an interesting read. And I think this is going to be one of my favorite new series of this year. Then we have my most anticipated book of this year, which isn't number one of this month, but very, very close second. It was just so highly anticipated that it was just hard to even judge it. I did a whole video about it, so you can watch that. But it's, of course, Crescent City. The third book, House of Flame and Shadow by Sarah J. Maas, 5 stars. Loved this book so much. Yeah, I did a whole video about it, so I don't need to go too deep into the plot. It's the third Crescent City book, so if you like Sarah J. Maas and haven't read the Crescent City books yet, these are really great. They're really, really fun. Something about the urban fantasy setting, I just really love it. There was a lot writing on this book too, and I just think it did such a good job of tying up a lot of things while also making me interested in looking forward of this series and other series. I just can't get over S. James' mind. I just wish I had her mind. Her world building is just fantastic. I love the characters in this. 5 stars, highly recommend, love it. Then my favorite book of this month was one that I was really anticipating, but I didn't think that I was gonna love it as much as I did. It's Bride by Ali Hazelwood. I loved this book. This was one that also just scratched maybe a very specific itch that I have. I don't know if it's just the vampire werewolf vibes. Ali Hazelwood's writing is funny and great and interesting. The characters were great. I don't know if it's because I watched a lot of Buffy the Vampire Slayer when I was younger. This just moved for me. A friend of mine just sent me something the other day, like a meme asking or saying like, ever open up a book and the very first line, it's just like, oh, this is for me. This is what I'm supposed to be reading. And as you read it, it just reconfirms that over and over again. And I told her, yeah, I read a book like 2 weeks ago and it was called Bride. And I swear from the very first page, and then as it was continuing on, I was just kind of like, I love this. It's like written for me. I'm totally into this love story. I really love the vampire and the human and the werewolf whole thing. It was another book that when I finished it, I kind of just wanted to immediately go back and reread it. I just had such a good, entertaining time reading it. I thought the plot was fun. I thought the characters were great. Our main girl was really funny and kind of sassy, and maybe that's why I'm getting sort of Buffy vibes from her, but she is a vampire in this. And then the love interest is a werewolf who he seems really standoffish in the beginning and you're not sure if we like him or what his motives are. And then he slowly becomes like one of the best book boyfriends ever. And I thought about this book a lot and I'm very excited. Hopefully there'll be more. This was our first like forte into fantasy writing. And there were a few characters she definitely left open to possibly doing more with these characters, which I would totally love. And I recommend this if you like any type of fantasy romance. If you've read anything from Ali Hazelwood and liked it, I would definitely read this book. So that was all the books that I read in February. This has been such a fun experience. I can't wait. I'm already trying to figure out my March TBR, so I'll be doing that video very shortly. But thank you so much for watching. If you haven't yet, please like or subscribe to my channel, and I'll see you in the next video.